Thank you for tuning in to my latest video. My name is Gordon Causey, coming to you from my little corner of Northumberland County, Ontario, southeastern Ontario, halfway between Oshawa to my west and Kingston to my east. Going to be offering up my thoughts, views, and opinions on the election that Canadians are embroiled in right now. We'll be going to the polls voting on April 28th. And specifically, I want to talk right now about Mark Carney unilaterally determining for Canada, acting as our prime minister, which is what he is. Mark Carney is the prime minister of Canada. He came into that role in a very curious, unconventional fashion, but nonetheless, legally, he is our prime minister. And he has just announced to the world that the close economic defense relationship that Canada has had with the United States of America, he has declared that, quote, it is over. It is over. And I think I find that to be highly irresponsible for someone who's in the role of basically a caretaker prime minister right now. Carney, again, he is legally the prime minister of Canada. He is the leader of the party in our House of Commons that currently, as of the last parliamentary session, has the most seats. So whoever the leader of that party is automatically occupies the office of the prime minister. However, Mark Carney himself has never been elected by Canadians to hold any position of any kind in our political system. He has been elected by about 151,000 card-carrying Liberal members decided to vault him into the position of leader of the Liberal Party. And with Parliament being suspended, the parliamentary term is prorogation, or we say that the Parliament has been prorogued, but Parliament is not sitting. So when Carney makes pronouncements as the Prime Minister of Canada, he's doing it without having received any mandate whatsoever from the Canadian population writ large. Only 151,000 odd Liberal Party members were allowed to decide who the Liberal Party leader was to be. And then, because the Liberals have the most seats in the current session of Parliament, which has now been disbanded, Parliament was dissolved for the purposes of having a general election, but we still have a Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and he is announcing forthwith that Canada's relationship, our close economic ties, our defense ties, our cultural ties, our largest trading partner, that relationship is over. And I'm here to say that I have no issue if Mark Carney wanted to say that going forward, should I be elected, I will end our close economic, militaristic, I'll end this close relationship we have had with the United States for the past, 80 or so years, if given a mandate by the people. But he didn't do that. He just declared it de facto as, I'm the king. I'm ending the closest economic relationship Canada's ever had with a foreign nation. Uh, for what it's worth, prior to World War II, our closest relationship was with, as a Commonwealth nation, was with Great Britain. However, with the emergence of the U.S. post World War II as the world's dominant economic and militaristic power, Canada's relationship with the United States has grown closer and closer and closer, culminating somewhat in 1988 when we entered into a free trade agreement with them. But now we're in a different situation. The world is constantly evolving. The dynamics are changing. It used to be back in 1988 when we entered into that free trade agreement, the world's counterbalancing power to the United States at that juncture was the old Soviet Union. Now, the counterbalancing power to the United States is that of communist China. And they are somewhat seen by many to be the power on the rise. And it certainly looks like Mark Carney has a very tight affinity with communist China. And he's looking to, well, he's already announced that Canada, that our relationship with the United States is over. Uh, Canadians will have the opportunity on April 28th to ratify that or not. And I know that this is a contentious issue because of one Donald J. Trump occupying the White House in the United States. And there are a lot of Canadians who are vehemently opposed, have absolutely no use for Trump. We've always had divisive issues. We've had individuals like Richard Nixon in the White House, individuals such as um, George W. Bush Jr., the son of George H.W. Bush. And we've had tenuous relationships between Canadian prime ministers and American presidents in the past. And we've always been able to work through them. Of course, the United States, like Canada, is a democracy. Donald Trump is not emperor of the United States. He has a term that expires in 2028. It would be early in the year 2029 when he is slated to be replaced by whomever the Americans choose. That's their system. We're not the 51st state. We're not part of the United States, although I, quite frankly, often think we act like it. We act as if we have some inherent right to sell our steel, aluminum, and whatever else into the United States as if we're part of their economic union, which we are not. They have the right to set their own import export policies. They can establish tariffs. We can do likewise. But that's something of a side issue at this point because does Mark Carney have the right to unilaterally declare a termination of the relationship between Canada and the United States? This situation between our two countries is getting worrisome. It's getting worrisome because a country like Canada, we're something of a medium power at best. We don't have much of a military. Our economic footprint is nowhere near the size of that of the United States. Their economy is more than 10 times greater than our own. And it's long, for all of Canada's history, we've been under the umbrella of a more dominating world power. At our inception in 1867, we were under the umbrella of the British. And then, as I was saying, post World War II, we moved closer and closer and closer into alignment with our southern neighbors, with the Americans. And if we does Canada have the defensive and economic power to stand alone in this very complex world of competing powers, of geopolitical games, sometimes called realpolitik? I'm here to say we don't. We have to align ourselves with somebody. And the two main powers in the world right now are America and China. And with all its flaws, and America is incredibly flawed, and so are we, with all its flaws, I will take the United States of America every day of the week and twice on Sunday as compared to China. I do not want to see my home and native land aligning itself with a communist country that does not respect the rule of law, does not respect what we sometimes foolishly take for granted in terms of the rights and freedoms that are enshrined in our Constitution and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, things like the right to free speech, the right to freedom of assembly, the right to freedom of religion, the right to freedom of the press. These are things that do not exist in a communist system. And Mark Carney is on record, as was Justin Trudeau before him, with talking up the Chinese and in basically, congratulating them in various ways. Mark Carney seems to think that the Chinese, who are constantly bringing more and more coal-fired electrical hydro generation online, that they're a huge, bastion of global environmentalism, and that they're going to help the world attain this utopia of net zero in terms of emissions. This is a country that when they bid for the Olympics in Beijing, they had to go around painting the dirt green to make it appear like it might even be, it might be grass. This is a country where people before COVID were wearing masks simply because the air is so polluted to breathe. And yet Mark Carney seems to think there's something of a leader on the environmental front. He seems very, very taken with China, as Trudeau was before in 2015. Trudeau was asked during a campaign event during that election. He was in Quebec, in Montreal, at a women's voting event, and he was asked if are what countries in the world he admired. And he admitted having admiration for the Chinese and for their basic dictatorship and how it allowed them to steamroll through and get things done. You don't have to worry about human rights. You don't have to worry about, the rule of law when you're a communist dictatorial system. And Canadians have to make a choice. Do we want to be cozying up to China, which is what Mark Carney seems to do? Do some reading, do some research into it. And, the loans that have been taken out under Carney's leadership of Brookfield, uh, there's just so much out there in terms of his affinity for China. And I don't have anything particularly I'm not inclined whether an individual is Chinese or not. Their ethnicity makes no difference to me. But in terms of politics, I'm not a fan of uh, communist China. Now, maybe there are liberal supporters who have bought into Marxist doctrine, who think that maybe there are those who think that Mao Zedong and his, cultural revolution, what they called the Great Leap Forward, when 100 million plus Chinese citizens were killed uh, during this quote unquote Great Leap Forward that Mao Zedong ushered in, sometimes also called the Cultural Revolution. We've got a hard decision coming up. And the conservatives are up against it hard in this election because I'm here to say that China has gained enormous influence in Canadian politics and in our media and in our corporate sector. China is the largest holder of non-sovereign debt in the world. And it's that old golden rule of he who has the gold makes the rules. And we are being drawn in to a Chinese sphere of influence, which is not good for if you are a believer in democracy, if you believe in the rule of law, freedom of speech, freedom to assemble, freedom of religion. If these are values that you ascribe to, well, you better give extreme pause to thinking about and investigate the degrees to which Mark Carney has aligned himself with Communist China. I'll leave you with that. You're welcome to comment down below. I put out videos frequently. I like doing them live. However, I live in a rural area and doing live videos of late, my connection has been experiencing a lot of lagging, a lot of buffering. So I'll probably be publishing more content like this, pre-recorded and uploaded, so that it's not as glitchy and lagging and buffering, and which leaves the live chat portion out, but you can still fill the comment field. Let me know what you think. I'm trying to grow my channel. It's difficult when I have a weak connection that doesn't allow me to do lives well. When the lives glitch, when they lag, when they buffer, that makes the viewer experience very annoying and very difficult to watch. Um, but if you would like to subscribe to my channel, I invite you to do it. The thumbs up, the likes are appreciated. You're equally welcome to share. I'm a 58-year-old Canadian male born 1966, served in the Canadian Armed Forces until June of 2021. I left the forces because I wasn't willing at that point to get the COVID jab, and I knew they would be forced on the military. And so I said, I got out. I released from the military, and as it turned out, the military did mandate that all members roll up their sleeves. Uh, when the jabs were first authorized in Canada back in December of 2020, I was in a wait and see mode where I recognized the fact that these had been rushed through development in just a few short months when pharmaceutical products, under pretty much every other circumstance, take years and years to develop. And so I simply wanted to wait and see. I knew a lot of people were going to be getting it, and I wanted to see, did they have any health issues, any adverse events, any reactions to the shots? And after what I have seen, I have determined that the risks associated with the shots, in my estimation, non-expert, far outweighed the risks associated with COVID. And so I've remained unjabbed and very happy about that decision. But I'm 58 years old after leaving the military in 2021. In 2022, I started working in a retail establishment, and I've been doing that ever since. I've lived many different places across Canada. I've lived in Kingston, I've lived in Toronto, I've lived in the suburbs around Toronto, I've lived in Quebec City, La Ville de Quebec. I also spent 10 years growing up in the United States of America. At the age of 6 months old, my family, my father was transferred down to New York. We lived down in New York and then later New Jersey. I went through kindergarten grades 1, 2, 3, 4 in the state of New Jersey. We had a brief period where we came back to Canada, where I was born. I was born in Port Colborne, Ontario, near Niagara Falls. We had a brief period when I was finishing grade 4 and then into grade 5, where I was in Burlington, Ontario. And then another year, grade 6, I spent living in Portland, Oregon on the West Coast. And then in 1978, when the summer I was turning 12, we moved back to Canada permanently, and Canada has been my country of residence ever since. I am Canadian born. I do not have American citizenship, but I did live down there for 9 plus, almost 10 years. So if you're interested in the perspective of someone with a different life experience, perhaps, I also studied political science at university, so I have some grounding in the political system. I know how our system works very well. And I can contrast it with the American system of Republican democracy versus our Canadian Westminster parliamentary system. The head of state of our government actually isn't the prime minister. The head of state is King Charles, and his representative is the governor general. And it's the Governor General who actually signs all Canadian legislation into law. But I'm rambling at this point. I'll keep this under 20 minutes. And again, I'll invite you to like, share, subscribe, all the above, and to fill the comment field. I'd love to know what others think. So we'll talk to you later.